Yeah, absolutely. Let's hop right into it. I don't even want to talk. Let's just get into it. This is a fun conversation to have.
So this is, I think, one of the most intriguing Hall of Fame voting classes in recent memory because the big thing about it is that, it's been a prolonged debate for years and years and years about, the steroid users. Should they get into the Hall of Fame? Well, should they not because of their steroid use? All that can be said right now is that the the four primary suspects that are still on the ballot. So that would be Barry Bonds, Kurt Schilling, Roger Clemens, Sammy Sosa. This is all their 10th year on the ballot. So if they don't get 75% of the vote this year, they're done. They're off the ballot and they're not going to get voted into the Hall of Fame by these means. So, Danny, I guess the question I got to just open up with is, I mean, what's your take on steroid users and the Hall of Fame? Do steroid users belong in the Hall of Fame, or do you think otherwise?
So we kind of talked about it a little bit pre-show, and I saw this on YouTube. I was doing some prep for this, and they mentioned a steroid tax. So if you use steroids, there needs to be something that, like, you have to be one of the greatest players of all time. And I think two of those, and Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, have very easily proven that they are two of, if not the two best players of all time. Barry Bonds for hitters and Roger Clemens for pitching. Uh, Roger Clemens, what, 7 Cy Youngs? Barry Bonds, a number of MVPs, leads the league or leads all-time home run records, most walks of all time, most feared hitter to ever step in a batter's box. So I think it's a large question, and I do think there's two different types of steroid users. In Barry Bonds' era, it wasn't necessarily like a big deal. I Because everyone was using steroids. I mean, that all that entire time, Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco, that whole Bash brothers and all that. Sammy Sosa was documented using steroids. I don't think Sosa's going to get in. He doesn't have enough percentage of the votes right now, and he honestly doesn't have the numbers for a steroid user to get in. But before that, it was kind of the wild, wild west. And then you look at a couple first year ballot guys. I know you love A-Rod as a Yankees fan. I think A-Rod has become a very, very good face for baseball at this point. But he knew, and it was very, very obvious that that was a no-no at the time that he was popped. So I think there's a different question. I think probably about pre-2010-ish, that range, or even before that, probably pre-2005, when steroids became a really big deal. I think there's potential that, if you were one of these all-time greats, one of the best players of all time, I think you deserve to be in. After that, it becomes a little trickier because it was very, very clear that steroids were a no-no.
Yeah, well, I want to ask those listening. I just want to ask one question that I think is the biggest argument for yes, steroid users have a place in the Hall of Fame. So that whole time period was dubbed the steroid era. So everyone was doing it. And the commissioner, let's be honest, the league was doing nothing to stop it at the time. They didn't care. It was enhancing their product. They were almost all for it. So let me just ask, what difference does the steroid era have with what pitchers did with spider tack this past year? Almost nothing. No, there was sure some competitive advantage gained, but at the same time with the spider tack stuff, the league was cracking down on nobody, and no one. There was no signs of it being, you know, something that should be frowned upon. Everyone was doing it, so everyone just continued to do it, and the league allowed it to happen, and that's what happened with steroids. So when you have guys like Barry Bonds who used it, you have to remember it was a different time period, and obviously the outlook on steroids now is very different from what it was in the early 2000s. But I think with the steroid guys in the Hall of Fame, I think people are just kind of rewriting history and rewriting how steroids have always been used, because it hasn't always been a cardinal sin. I mean, steroids were accepted at one point in baseball, and I don't think guys like Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens, I personally don't think they should be kept out of the Hall of Fame because of that.
Couldn't agree with you more. You took the words out of my mouth. Another guy that you had mentioned, Kurt Schilling. I think at this point, I can't. I honestly I can't see him getting in at this point after his comments about the writers and all his political stuff. The character clause is just going to keep him out until he gets to the Veterans Committee, where he is probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame at some point. However, I do not think on the final year of his ballot that he is going to be getting in this year.
Yeah, especially with all the drama that happened last year of Curt Schilling not getting in. Now, we're not doubting Curt Schilling's resume at all. Like, he has all the accomplishments and accolades to get into the Hall of Fame. But I mean, I'm so sick of the character clause and, passing that standard. It's the same thing with the Aaron Rodgers thing. Like, why does it matter that Curt Schilling, Curt Schilling, you can say bad guy, bad person, don't agree with his beliefs at all. You can say that, but the Curt Schilling, the player, is one of the best pitchers to ever live. So he's up there with some of the best pitchers ever. So to keep him out of the Hall of Fame because you don't like him and you don't agree with what he stands for, I mean, sure, that's fair. It's fair to not agree with what he believes in, but to keep him out of the Hall of Fame because of that, I just don't get that at all. I think Curt Schilling should be in the Hall of Fame. But again, the idea of should they be and will they be is something entirely different.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that comes full circle to the steroid users as well. Maybe you didn't agree with what they did and maybe it's frowned upon. However, it was at a time where it was pretty much widely accepted. And with Curt Schilling, you may not agree with everything he does, but he is one of the greatest pitchers of all time. He helped a couple teams win a couple World Series. So it sucks for Curt Schilling, but I think at this point he's just looking forward to being done with this whole Hall of Fame process.